My name is Jennifer McGill, and this is my story. So I grew up in a church. I grew up with a very loving family, a brother, a sister, a mom, and a dad. We grew up in the United Methodist Church. And really my whole life I kind of was always involved. I was always at VBS. I was very active in our church and always felt like, of course I'm a Christian. You know, if you'd asked me, of course I'm a Christian. It wasn't until I was about 20 years old that I really realized what that meant and what being a Christian really was, which is ironic because for me, again, growing up in the church, I always assumed that this is what it looks like. This is God in my life, and I always felt happy. And but nothing profound had ever really happened. It was just sort of God is God and I am me, and we're supposed to walk together somehow. When I was 20, I had been really good friends with this guy, and actually really good friends for about 8 years. And one night I got drunk. I had just gotten out of a relationship and I was sad, and I got drunk. And one time, we did it one time, and I ended up pregnant. At 20 years old, I called him and said, hey, I'm pregnant, I don't know what to do. And he was walking into a class at college, and he said, I'll call you back. And I said, of course, you know, it's a shock, take your time. And he changed his phone number, and never really heard from him again after that. So here I am, 20 years old, and I'm a Christian, and I know what that looks like, and I know what I'm supposed to do. And all of a sudden, I'm faced with this decision of, what do I do? Do I bring this life into the world? Can I do this? Am I equipped to do this? And ultimately, I decided yes. Within a day, really, of contemplation, knew that I was going to have to lean in pretty tight to my faith, and that the only way I could do this alone was with God, so that I wasn't really alone. And Haley was born in 2005, and she was incredible. She had some health issues and some struggles of her own. She dealt with a little bit of abandonment issues that I would have to learn over time to coach her through and to walk her through. But what I found was that I always felt like God was there. But there was one moment for me that I think defines the beginning of my walk, my real walk, the most. And that is, I remember one day I was working at a bank at the time, and I was, trying to make sure that she was in daycare and that my car ran, and I had all the things that I needed to be able to provide for my daughter. Pretty mundane stuff, you have to have a job, you have to provide for them, you have to give them food and shelter and all the things that they need. And I knew I couldn't lose daycare, and my car payment was due and the daycare payment was due. And there was a day I was sitting at the front desk at the bank, and I started crying. I was pretty overwhelmed with how was I going to do all of this, that I'd made it this far, but this moment seemed so incredibly impossible on how I was going to be able to come up with the money that I needed to keep the things that she needed. And the CFO of the bank, I really had never spoken to her, but she walked in that day, and I tried to wipe my tears and look normal, and she kind of smiled and waved. And we went on our business. That night, I went home, and of course, I'm laying in bed, and I'm crying, and I'm weeping and praying. God, show me how I can do this. Give me a way. Just tell me what I need to do. I can't figure this out. And the next morning, I got to work, and the CFO came in like she always did, and instead of just smiling and waving, she looked at me and said, hey, could you follow me real quick? And took me into her office. And while we were in her office, she goes, I don't really know your name. I don't know much about you at all. But for some reason, while I was praying last night, your name came up, and I couldn't get you off of my heart. And God asked me to do something for you. And she slid an envelope across the table. And in that envelope was, to the penny, exactly what I needed to pay the daycare and my car payment. And the money, of course, was profound, and it made an impact because it was exactly what I needed, and I knew that God had provided. But the bigger impact for me was how incredible that must have been the night before, where I'm a single mother crying out for help, and I'm lost, and I'm alone, and I'm asking God to show me a way. And at the same time, there's a woman across town saying, God, use me. Show me where you need me. And he used her to impact my life. And it was in that moment that I realized that my walk with God wasn't what it should have been, that God's real and he's huge. And it was just such a profound moment for me. And it kind of really defines that moment of faith for me, where I really stepped up into that role of a Christian, and not just saying I'm a Christian, but trying to live that life and trying to tell others about God and what God had just done for me. It was sort of my run off the fishing boat into the village moment. And I think about that moment often now that I'm older, and it was shortly after that I began praying, God, I'm alone and I'm doing this and I'm fine with that, but if you want me to have someone else, I'm going to be pretty picky about that. And I began making a list of what I would want in a future husband. And it wasn't a list just for me, it was a list for what I would need as a future father, for my kids, for the kid that I had and any future kids that I was going to have. And I made a pretty detailed list. In fact, I even included on that list that I wanted a man in uniform, thinking that's so silly, but I mean, come on, man in uniform's nice. And so I remember looking over the list and really praying to God that if this is what you want for me, and this is the path that I'm supposed to take, I'm going to need these specific things, kind of a laundry list of items, and my perfect mate. And what I didn't know was, again, at the same time across town, there was a man on his knees praying, God, I'm ready for you to impact my life, and I'm ready for you to make me better and to show me a different direction. And if you want me to be married, then I need you to show me my wife. And it was actually the next day that we met online. We had a pretty short courtship. I did marry a firefighter. So that man in uniform came true for me. We met in July and we got married in April. And it was shortly after that, about a year later, that he said, Haley's my daughter and I love her so much. And so he adopted her. And we went on to have one more child, a little boy, and they're about 8 years apart. And it's amazing to me when I think back on those moments that really defined my faith, that it was always times when I was crying out to God, saying, God, I need you to show me, I need you to provide, I need you to do this because I'm too dense to figure it out on my own. And each time God stepped up in a big way and showed me exactly what he could do, and what his plan was, and made it known in really big ways, from having to the penny the exact dollar that I needed to keep going, to providing down to the uniform the exact man that I wanted and that he knew was perfect for me, and for the kids. And so for me, my walk is very much consistent of, I thought I was there, I thought I was a Christian until I knew I was a Christian, until I knew that God was absolutely there. And, even me living in my own little bubble, God was always in that bubble with me and my daughter, with me and my husband. He's been there all along. And that's the biggest impact of my story, is just that God's there. And I've witnessed it. I've seen it. I've seen it in big ways. I've seen it in little ways. And I've always looked at it like it's my obligation now to go out and tell the world that God is absolutely real, that God is in that bubble with you, and He will provide. He will step in big ways. He will step in little ways, but He will never leave you. And that's been the biggest impact of my journey, and hopefully I'm able to take that out and impact the lives of others. Just the fact that God stepped up for me, and a lot of times even when I really didn't deserve it, He stepped up for me in big ways. So that's my story.